On today's episode, we're flipping the script. Everyone's asking what's going to change in the agency business because of AI. Peter and I have been asking a different question, borrowed from Jeff Bezos. What isn't going to change in the next 10 years? We've come up with 6 themes we'll cover today.
All right, so before we kind of dive in, it's probably worth reading the full Bezos quote because this is a really good one that he's obviously applied during his kind of rise, the rise of Amazon, and it's something that has been a very core to their success. So here's the full quote. I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is a very interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time.
Yeah, it's interesting because every agency conversation that we have these days is it starts with what's changing with AI, and obviously that matters a lot, right? Because AI is having a big impact across the board. But if AI is really the whole conversation and the only thing you're thinking about, really your strategy is you're building against a moving target. You look at something in April and then you look at it in like October, like it's totally different. Like your whole approach for AI can change so quickly.
So, I think these are all things that are obviously we're all grappling with. But yeah, today, just wanting to sit with this other question, right? And like, thinking about what will be true, even beyond this kind of AI disruptive wave that we're feeling right now. And so, yeah, let's dive into the 6 themes that we came up with.
The first theme is that it still starts with trust. I think, one of the fundamentals of an agency business is that it's really a trust business. If you think about clients and their relationship with us, they're handing us, their brand, their reputation, their budget, and for in some cases their career is on the line for working with an agency. And those fundamentals don't really change because the tools and AI change. If anything, if you think about the relationship, it gets even more intense because there's more changing in the environment and the industry, and clients really need to feel like they're in good hands with an agency.
Yeah, and as we kind of brainstormed this and thought a bit deeper, right? When people typically think about trust, it's about like building more trust, like, hey, let's build trust, build trust. But we kind of inverted that as well, and we kind of asked ourselves, hey, what breaks trust? Just because like if you think about the client dynamic, you can have a great thing going with them, and then all of a sudden, if something happens that kind of hurts that trust, like it could really unravel a lot of the goodwill you've built up. So, we made a little short list of like things that won't change in terms of breaking trust. So, the first one is like promising something and not delivering. Bad surprises, right? Especially about money or timing. Saying one thing to the client and a different thing internally, and then not owning up when we make a mistake, and mess up. So like those are things I think even in 10 years, whether AI is doing the work or human, like it's still going to be something that, impacts trust in a big way.
Yeah, it's interesting because like there's like many ways that you could try to appear more trustworthy, to a client or at large. Like you can do more like case study work, you can do like testimonials, you can like apply for awards, you can like working on your website. But yeah, it's really thinking about the opposite, like to your point, right? It's like what are the things that you're doing that are actually breaking trust? Like in the day to day, like you didn't send out a status update to your client, or they got like a surprise change order
It's the worst.
that showed up in their inbox out of nowhere. And then if your invoicing isn't synced up, maybe you've invoiced before you actually delivered the work.
Clients hate
And like
that.
these are the things that like clients remember. And when they think about your relationship working with them, like those are the things when your name comes up, they're like, oh, like these guys, they did this.
Yeah, and really, I think the natural inclination for a lot of folks is like, oh, AI automates stuff, so now we can turbocharge and automate and scale up our marketing, and so now we can have tens of thousands of LinkedIn followers more easily than before. We could blast emails to all these people that need to learn about us, and I think it just kind of goes back to, some of the things that we've been talking about on this podcast, which is like, look, we're in, the business of, expertise and, really helping solve problems. And those things really start with a smaller group of people, maybe 50 people, maybe 100. These are folks that like know you, can vouch for you. And then, it's about investing in those relationships, because those are the folks who are going to have that impact on referring you quality opportunities. And so, yeah, like, do you, know them personally, maybe even know their kids' names, or are you showing up for them when, maybe they're fundraising, or, they have a new job. And then, also just staying top of mind by sending them, maybe valuable articles that you found, you think that might be helpful for them. It's like these things that the work is still, needed to kind of cultivate and, build those relationships.
Yeah, it's funny because, you can't automate the relationship part of it, but there's some aspects where AI can help. Like AI can help you like refer, oh, what did we talk about last time? And you can look at your call recording, or if you need to like draft an email, like AI can help you do a better job of that. But like the work of, caring for someone, like showing up for them, and then just being kind of there for them in all phases of life over several years is really that's like the human relationship that you have with people. So it's easy for now. You can like spot when like AI is trying to like fake warmth in an email, or uh like people can see through it.
Yeah.
But over time, the more you can build true relationships, your agency will continue to benefit from that.
Yeah, and I think this is where like the old school kind of idea of like the FaceTime, as in like the literal like showing up in person, in the flesh, and like being around people, and like just kind of, creating moments together. I think it's gonna be important.
All right. So the second theme is strategic focus, or where not to play. We've talked about this quite a bit on this podcast, but specialization is really the unlock for everything else in an agency. If you have a narrower focus, your marketing gets sharper, your sales conversations get easier and shorter, the delivery for all the work you have gets more repeatable, your pricing, you can demand more for it, and the team that you hire, bring in, all the processes get easier, and you can hire more effectively for. So all of that, with specialization doesn't change with AI. And if anything, um, like the penalty for not being specialized and being a generalist actually goes up, because there'll be so many other generalists offering agencies that have that use AI to deliver their work, and it's just there'll be more and more competitors in that space.
Yeah. And so, yeah, just kind of going along with that, so if you specialize, like obviously you have to kind of be able to articulate it. So the positioning side of it becomes, a real, conviction move, right? So like you have to bet, what you are, and, more importantly, what you're not, because that is really hard, right? So, you can say, hey, we're a Shopify agency, doing stuff for CPG food and beverage brands. But uh, on the flip side, you have to be able to say, no, we're not going to take on that, industrial B2B project that, is a warm lead. And so I think, most agency owners just, deep down know that they should narrow their focus and their, kind of the things they say yes to, but they typically freeze when it's time to actually turn work away. It's really hard, right? And that's the real work of positioning. And I think the decision to leave money on the table uh, is tough, but it's actually the thing that's going to help you find the right clients faster.
Yeah, and yeah, to that point, like agencies that are easier to buy are the ones that are kind of narrow in that positioning. So when you know someone, a prospect, is describing their problem to a friend who might know you, and it's clear to say, hey, that is, you should talk to these people because that's exactly what they do, and that's really positioning, doing its job. And that only really happens if you've done the work of committing and being that specific answer to a specific question that someone is trying to ask.
Yeah, and this is like kind of comes back to like this is, you know, AI is not going to change it because you still have to make that strategic decision about what you want to be. And so, AI, of course, can help amplify that. Once you kind of have that decision made, and especially if you're positioning it sharp, like AI, you could turbocharge that with AI. Better content, better outreach, better case studies, all that stuff, right? Like AI is going to be instrumental, but yeah, that core decision of like the big decision is still a very much a timeless thing that I think is going to stretch out into the future.
Yeah, that's right. The next theme that we'll touch upon is talent. So,
And this is human
people,
talent. Just to be clear, this is
human
human talent.
talent.
Yeah,
Yes.
gotta be
Um,
explicit.
yeah, I mean, people ask us all the time, like, is AI going to shrink your team, agency teams in general? And, our answer to that is yes, probably, right? I think, you know, that may be the reality, but the bigger story that we're thinking about isn't about, the numbers or the headcount. It's about, the skills on each person, on the team and what they are now capable of using AI.
Right. Yeah, I think the old model, right, of like kind of the more pyramid structure is definitely going to be questioned. So the where by pyramid structure we mean like you have like a bunch of junior level folks that are paid less, and then you have a smaller number of like senior roles, and so the junior roles are like really. The ones that are cranking out the work, the deliverables and stuff, and then you have somebody above them checking the quality of that work. And now what are we seeing, right? We're seeing a lot of those juniors, and then sometimes it's even like offshore talent that's being, replaced with AI. And then what does that do? That kind of puts a more of a premium on that senior level, the folks that are rather than just checking the work. Now they have to kind of think about, all right, like here's a brief or a problem that we're helping solve for a client. Got to figure out like really what are we really solving for? How to and then how to direct AI to do the production work, and then like review that. Make sure it's it's differentiated kind of work, and then definitely articulate what that is to the client. So this is like really about understanding the level of talent and capability in those people who are gonna help your agency to the next level. But once again, this is still about people and talent. Like this is that's always been a constant.
I would say on the flip side, I would say the leadership gets even more important in this kind of framework because, like there's so many tools and your output can continue growing, but ultimately it comes down to judgment for a leader. So deciding, like what we talked about, specialization, like what client should we take on? If we're going to shift our engagement models and pricing and how we're selling and working with clients. All of that are bigger kind of decisions that will need to be made, by someone in a leadership position. Yeah, thinking about the roles. Who are the people that are really embracing AI, for example, and like who do you invest in from a talent standpoint over time? And a lot of these decisions are still very human and aren't. They could be supported by AI, but aren't going to be made solely by AI. So it's a lot of leadership decisions there.
Yeah. Just as an aside, I know like there are some folks who are like incredibly excited about this like one person agency with, like dozens of or hundreds of agents that are kind of like, doing all these things and can kind of provide incredible amounts of leverage. I think maybe at certain levels that that is going to be a durable business. But I can't help but to think like the concept of team and like just this idea of like continuing to build out a team, and finding and keeping these people is still gonna be a timeless and just something that we're still gonna see years from now because I think there's something about you know, um, even with all the things that AI enables, that just the human kind of collaboration enables, that is still not going to go away.
On that note, let's talk about the fourth theme. So, call it hospitality, or really the experience as the real deliverable. Um, so, if you think about most agencies, They think that the deliverable is what they're selling, they're making. If it's a website, if it's a campaign, it's a brand system. But really, the client's experience that they have working with an agency is, a big part of what they're are buying, whether or not that was intentional or not. Um, so if you think about, from a interaction standpoint, how did they feel about a kickoff meeting? Whether, you have a weekly status meeting, and is it like really well planned, or is it chaotic? Is it, and the humans on the other side, when you give feedback, how is that? Like, do you receive it openly? Do you push back? Uh, like, are you defensive? Like, those aren't, those are like very critical for thinking about that experience that the client has working with you. And that ultimately, you can think of that as the product that your agency is also selling.
Yeah. And just also to think about like the real job the client is hiring us for, it isn't just like the stuff that's kind of bulleted out in an SOW, So it's the more, you could say mushier stuff of like, make me feel confident about this decision, right? Make me look good to my CEO, or take this off my plate so that I can sleep more easily, or like, or just this idea of like, hey, show me you understand my world, because it's very lonely trying to figure this out on my own. And so I think, like, of course, the work is important, and, like, it's important to deliver something perfect. But like, if the client felt, kind of anxious, out of the loop, under communicated to, like, all of this can easily fall apart. And just going back to what we said in the first one, the trust can easily be eroded.
Yeah, and like we call this hospitality, right? If you think about your experience at like a restaurant or hotel, like if the food could be awesome, right, on the table, but then if all the things leading up to it, like tension at like the moment you arrive at the restaurant, like the server giving you an attitude and all that, like that affects. It's not just about the thing that appears in front of you, whether it tasted good or not.
Yeah. Okay. So to that point, real quick, like, because like hospitality, it conjures up so many analogies to the restaurant space, and you could argue with AI, right? There's going to be, you know, just like in the restaurant space, you have kind of the fast casual type of experiences where you order by app. You just go, you pick up, you're not interacting with any humans. Even when you go to the restaurant, you're putting in stuff on a kiosk, and then you just pick up your food, and it's very minimal human interaction, but you get the deliverable, right? You get your food, and then it's done. Like,
Yep.
that is a business model. And I think, this
Hmm.
I think agencies, many agencies are kind of running to that model with kind of this, agentic and like, self-service, like clients, blurring software and service together. So there's that component. But I think you could argue that there's going to be more and more, I mean, there's going to be appetite also for that fine dining experience where, yeah, you are looking for, that white glove, white tablecloth, like, a 4-star service of like being attended to, every need being anticipated, like your water is filled before you even think to, ask for it, just all kinds of things that like provide an experience. And I do truly believe, like, even in the future, clients will still be willing to pay for that premium. Um and and, and the work itself, it is going to also have, kind of that craftsmanship, the floor, like these kinds of like, it's not like a assembly line assemble thing, but there's like this craft, custom, like thoughtfulness that goes into it. So maybe that is an interesting analogy to kind of think about along these lines.
Yeah, no, yeah, I guess they can totally coexist where you can have both scenarios, but we're saying, in 10 years, there'll still be value to, that relationship, that experience. And like from an agency perspective, like what are some things that makes you feel like you have a really good experience? Like, you have a agenda before a meeting, or, you know, a team sends a recap after a meeting on like what do we cover and what's going to happen next. Like it's all the proactivity around like, hey, I think a project is going to go sideways, and not being defensive about feedback. There's so many ways that you can provide a good experience around the work, on top of the actual deliverable of what you're you know providing to a client.
Yeah. No, I love the, if you're being held up at a restaurant and they bring you the free champagne, and it's like,
Okay.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry, it's
Oh, it
gonna
feels
take you
better.
15 more minutes for a table to clear. It's like, all
Yeah.
right, cool, I'll enjoy the champagne. Yeah. So yeah, like just to sum that up, like AI is really, right now at least they're very good at the output part. But the kind of that human to human caring, that's what we're talking about. It's got to be still relevant 10 years.
Right. The next theme is so the fifth theme, the work itself, and the results and the surprise from that. So let's think about just stripping down everything else, and the core of an engagement um, is the same. Pre AI, post AI. Clients are paying agencies for results, for value, and for speed. And also, if you think about, in addition to that, it's they want to be surprised. By thinking that an agency could provide that they couldn't have done themselves, right? We think, you know, in 10 years, those like four constants aren't going to disappear. And if anything, they're going to get increasingly more demanding.
Yeah, I mean, just to start with like the results, right? Because clients first off, like they're spending dollars to, just invest, in something, right? Some kind of an outcome, and so I think that's super key to any of these engagements. And then of course, like the value associated with that matters because like they're not gonna have infinite budget. They have to feel like you know they're not overpaying for something, that there is a consumer surplus for them, like, hey, look, I got a good deal, like it feels like this is, I paid the right amount. And then of course speed has always mattered, but I think AI has kind of pushed clients to think about like hey, like I should expect things on a tighter timeline, or I think fast means something a little bit different. And so I think those are all very important. And then when we talk about like this idea of surprise, I think it's like it's a combination of like creative, like this creativity, the delight, or just kind of being challenged, I think, by the agency you hire, because the part of why an agency is brought in is for that fresh perspective to kind of, hey, like help me see something that maybe is a blind spot for me. And so I think these are all things that make make the agency engagement, that relationship, and the work that comes out of it still meaningful.
Yeah, if it's just execution, clients would just build a team in house, which has always been the case, right? That nothing has changed there. Um, but yeah, if you think about like the next 10 years, um, what AI is providing is like the floor has increased, right? Not the ceiling. So, if you think about execution, fast execution, competent execution, all of that keeps rising where, you know, agencies will need to keep up on pace and quality, or else they're going to be not part of the conversation or priced out. But to your point, to bring in an agency, often clients want ideas that they didn't expect, fresh perspective, and like that is something that will continue to be valuable to a client.
Yeah, and I think you could argue like, okay, like AI can help you generate more and more ideas, and maybe like that they plays a part in you being more effective on that front. But like it's still a concept of like, hey, you still have to be bold enough to approach a client and bring those ideas, frame it to them in the right way, really understand their business and make it relate, all that stuff. And so there's definitely a timeless element to that has been done in the past, and it's something that's going to continue into the future.
Right. So we're at theme number 6. Um, it's focusing on the long view. So I think this theme is interesting because it's hard to have perspective on when things are moving so fast day to day. And I think patience is one of the rare things that is still undervalued in this business. Maybe for us, having been in for so long, and seeing a lot of people wanting the quick fix to things or the quick results.
The things that matter for an agency often take years to build, right? Like some of the, your best clients are going to be people that you work with for, 5, 10 years, and, it's also your best team members are also going to be people that have been, that you might have developed from when they were, just like fresh into the work. And then now they've kind of moved up the ranks and become, really important and indispensable to the business. And then, like reputation, right? That's something that we've talked over and over again about, like, look, it's a commitment. It's not something you can just like flip a switch on and all of a sudden you have great reputation. It's something that you really have to invest in and kind of build and build. And yeah, and I think part of like the brand building exercise for agencies, the of like and just being able to build up that like referral network, just and kind of build up that inbound quality is something that just takes several years, and it's really hard to just expect that to happen all of a sudden just because AI exists.
Yeah. And so I guess for any agency leader, it's really thinking about, the long term. Like what are you doing now that will pay off in 10 years? It's what's like the long-term payoff? Like what are the client relationships that you're investing in that still want to have in 10 years? What are the who are the people on your team that could be running your agency in 10 years when if you decide to step back in that period of time? But what is kind of the long-term vision there? And we talk about positioning and specialization. Like what are the choices that are uncomfortable now to make, but that will take time, but eventually could pay off over the next decade. So really it's thinking about, yeah, long-term perspective versus, what's the, in addition to, what are the tools and processes that you have to capture and make sure you're on top of right now.
Yeah, and I think like, just 10 years, that is long. Even like 3 years, honestly, is like in today's age is a long-term perspective. So like I think in a especially in a period now where like, every month feels like a year's worth of developments and changes, like it's worth just being like, look, what is our 3-year plan, and asking those questions that you noted. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we made it. So those are the six, right? Trust, strategic focus, talent, hospitality, the work itself, and the long view. And so yeah, this is been kind of the maybe the antidote to the AI fatigue. That everything's AI, but like this is the stuff that we think is going to be still relevant in the next 10 years. So thanks for joining us, and until next time, have a good one.
Thanks.